like to thank everyone for coming today. My name is Natasha Ritzma, and I'm the curator at Luma and the curator of the Folded Map exhibition. And we are so thrilled to have such a great crowd tonight. It has been such a pleasure working with both Tanika and Paula on this exhibition and putting this all together. So I'm very excited about tonight's event. I'm going to introduce Marissa Navarra, who will introduce Tanika and Paula, and then I have some questions prepared, and then we will invite the audience to come up. So if, after we're done with our first set of questions, if you can just line up to ask questions. This is our other functional mic other than the two that our two guest panelists have. So, all right. So Marissa Navarra joined the Metropolitan Planning Council in 2011. She directs MPC's housing and community development work and manages technical assistance and support to communities facing development challenges related to housing, transportation, transit-oriented development, and economic development. She designed and manages the multi-year Cost of Segregation project. Prior to MPC, Marissa spent a year in Milan, Italy, completing her master's degree in urban planning with a focus on international development. Her studies were informed by years of work on the ground in Chicago, most recently with Lawndale Christian Development Cooperation, where she directed more than $30 million in affordable rental and for sale housing development in the North Lawndale neighborhood. Marissa's writing has been published by the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Huffington Post, Crain's Chicago Business, Next City, American Planning Association, and Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. Her research has been featured in The Economist, The New York Times, CNN, Forbes, Ebony, Bloomberg View, the Atlantic City Lab, Chicago Magazine, the Chicago Reader, National Public Radio, and I can go on and on. So without further ado, I would like to thank Marissa to the podium. And I'd also like to thank everyone else at MPC. You've been fantastic to work with, so I just want to thank you guys.
Thanks so much, Natasha, and thanks to you and Luma for hosting this event and this amazing exhibit. And I'm so honored to set the stage for Paula Aguirre Serrano and Tanika Johnson to have their first ever joint public conversation about the making and meaning of the Folded Map exhibit, which they co-created. And I also do want to thank my coworker Gabriel Tyler, who worked closely with Natasha and Tanika to tie this work together. When we first heard about this project, a bunch of us in our office were like, this is amazing, we're emailing each other. Gabriel was the one who actually took the step, though, to reach out to Tanika and to really forge a connection for which all of us at MPC who worked on the Cost of Segregation project are so grateful. So as Natasha said, I'm with the Metropolitan Planning Council. I led our work on the Cost of Segregation project, and Tanika asked me to provide a little context about Chicago and about our segregation tonight before we get started. So I want to tell you a little bit about this project, just a little, because I know you didn't come here to hear me. We set out a couple years ago to answer two questions. One, what does it cost us to live so separately by race and income in Chicago? And two, what do we do about it? So I want to tell you just a couple things we learned along the way. One is that doing nothing about our segregation, which we really set in motion in earnest about 100 years ago with the start of the Great Migration, doing nothing about that segregation costs us dearly. It costs all of us. We found that if the Chicago region dropped to the median of segregation, we would see another $4.4 billion in African American income annually. We would see a 30% drop in homicides and another 83,000 bachelor's degrees. But here's another thing we learned. When we put that report out in March of 2017, and that study, as I just mentioned, explicitly quantified the negatives of segregation. But we also know that integration will not solve every problem. And that if we don't directly address the racism that caused redlining and restrictive covenants 80 years ago, it will just continue to morph into things like predatory lending and inequitable community investments that we still see today. Basically, racism shapeshifts, right? So we have to directly address that. And so because segregation is fundamentally a byproduct of racism, our roadmap for this region that we had released earlier this year, and that you see copies of in the exhibit, thanks again, Gabriel, focuses on racial equity and inclusion. And that is the way to disrupt the Chicago region's legacy of segregation. So I'm a policy nerd and I could talk about that stuff all day long, but what I'm excited about tonight is that we have a chance to have a different kind of conversation. How to dig into these issues and how they play out in the day-to-day lives of people and in human interactions, and what the role of art is to illuminate that. That's the conversation that we're going to have tonight that I'm really excited about. So I want to introduce the stars of the evening, the incredibly talented Tonika Johnson and Paula Aguirre Serrano. Tonika Johnson is a visual artist and photographer from Englewood. In 2010, she helped co-found the Resident Association of Greater Englewood, while she now serves as its full-time program manager. She was featured in Chicago Magazine as a 2017 Chicagoan of the Year for her photography of Englewood's everyday beauty, in the face of pervasive media coverage that paints a very different and generally more negative viewpoint. And it's Tonika's photography, both of buildings themselves and of the people that live in buildings and different addresses, that really make up the heart and soul of the folded map exhibit. Paula Aguirre Serrano is the founder of Borderless, a Chicago-based urban design and research studio. Paula is also an educator. She teaches architecture at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. She's taught urban design and social impact design. And Paula created the map that you see in the exhibit. And what's interesting, she turned it on its side, right? We normally know, and it's actually, if all of you did as you were told and went to see the exhibit before you came up here, it's a little disorienting, and I think that's part of the point, right? We need to lose our way a bit. And in fact, she said, when we talked a little bit ahead of time, and one comment that you made, Paula, you said, the more you map Chicago, the more you realize how little you know of Chicago. And I'd like to just leave with that comment as a challenge for us. What are the places that we don't know, that we actively avoid, that we assume are uninteresting or dangerous? And how does that play out differently by race? I think we have to be honest about who in this city gets to choose to explore certain neighborhoods and choose to avoid others, and who doesn't. For some, getting to know a neighborhood comes not from exploring, but with the price of a 2-hour commute to go to the highest performing high school that you could get into, or to get into a job that would hire you. And you don't get to ask if you're okay with being uncomfortable or being out of place or being the only one when you're in that situation. So for those of us for whom exploring is a choice, I think let's think of it not as an option, but as an honor and as an imperative. And let's give our thanks to Tonika and Paula for their exhibit that creates all in one room some of that exploration for us.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So, Tonika and Paula, my first question is, can you both briefly describe your background and other projects you've worked on that connect to the Folded Map project?
So Paula, go ahead.
I think you should start the story.
Okay, I'll start. Most obviously, I am the co-founder and current program manager of Resident Association of Greater Englewood. And we are just a group of concerned residents in Englewood who meet actively to create solutions for change, positive change. And so this is the space that I was operating in as primarily a volunteer before I came on board in the position of program manager a year ago. And I didn't have my artist hat on. I was just a resident of Englewood. I carried my camera around all the time, and I took photos of the community and some of the events that Rage was doing. But what happened is, with the success that we had as a community that created the Inglewood Rising Billboard campaign, which was us raising money to rent 5 billboards in Inglewood over the course of 9 to 10 months, using photography to create pride in the community, but also to eventually interrupt the media's narrative of Inglewood. I saw the response, the community response. They were really happy. And then when it started getting reported on in the news, I was like, oh, okay, this, look at art. It's actually interrupting the exact thing that us in the community are working to change, which is shifting the narrative of Inglewood. So it was at that time that I thought of using my lifelong observations that are shown in Folded Map to really go ahead and try to tackle these issues in the way that I have been observing it my whole life, that really uplifts the work that the residents of Inglewood were doing. I was in countless meetings where residents are concerned about some form of displacement. Thousands of people have left Inglewood as a result of the conditions it's going through. But then there's a strong base of residents who are trying to actively create opportunities for people to become homeowners in Inglewood, helping people learn about different banking products. So this is the environment that I was around as a volunteer and co-founder of Rage. So when you're in those spaces with people who are committed to really changing and creating the upliftment and betterment of their community, you really just want to attack everything from a multifaceted approach. So I was like, okay, I have to bring my art into this somehow to help people see the importance of this work. And it was my community members who actually uplifted me and told me that my art was valuable and could help further the cause. So Rage in general is the primary work that I've done that preceded Folded Map, that helped me to do Folded Map. And before that, just being a young African American girl growing up in Inglewood, that was primary motivators of Folded Map and kind of the role my perspective played into Folded Map. So I would say those two things is what led up to kind of Folded Map being created.
But I think, can you hear me well? But I think you also said something like, in a tweet, because you're very active. I follow your tweeters. But you said something like, all my life has led me to just kind of understand this idea of a folded map. You just didn't call it that way.
Yeah.
But the way that you navigated the city, this project was already in your mind and in your heart for many years ago.
Yeah, no, that's true. It was through being forced to go into different communities as a result of, having to, or wanting to, my mother wanted me to go to the high school that I went to, which is Lane Tech. I was forced to get to know the city in a way that I was unprepared for, but, proved to be worthy. And that got me acclimated with the map. And it was no cell phones, it was no MapQuest or anything. So, you had to really start memorizing the numeric system of the grid map. So my knowledge of that definitely informed me appreciating our map system, but then it led to the questions that I had, like, well, why does it look this way? And yeah, so no, that's true. My whole life did kind of lead up to Folded Map.
Yeah, don't forget to say that. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an import to Chicago. I moved here in 2011, originally from Chihuahua, Mexico. And I came to work for a very good company, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, working in their city design studio. And we were pursuing design excellence and planning cities all around the world, not working enough in Chicago. So while I was trained to think and to see and imagine cities from 10,000 feet up, I was doing many maps. Don't let me not say that. I was creating so many beautiful maps of cities that I've never even know how to pronounce anymore, and all over the world. But my career started in Mexico just right after architecture school and public service. So I work in government, and I feel that connection with public service and learning how to work with social impact or public interest projects was embedded in me. So I left Skidmore and had an opportunity, a really great opportunity to work in Southside communities, Washington Park specifically, and Greater Grand Crossing, with a group called Place Lab at University of Chicago. So did that for a year, and it was a tremendous and contrasting change. Working from 10,000 feet, understanding visions that were crafted for 30, 50 years from now, and working with the community. All of a sudden, having conversations about segregation and race and underinvestment. So it was a very complex thinking or trouble that I was trying to understand why. This narratives that you hear about Chicago, about this being this amazing city, but we don't get to hear the stories that are also important beyond the central area. So I founded Borderless as a formal practice in 2016. But the idea had been, I've been cultivating the idea of a practice called Borderless since 2012 when I went to grad school. The idea behind that, and it's a little bit of what you were saying at the end, we are trained in this mindset, no matter what discipline you come from, is that you can only do one thing, and you can only practice one thing at a time. Whereas initially this idea of borderless came because I'm from a border region between the United States and Mexico. This idea of multicultural, across geographies, it was very appealing to me. And I started making these maps about other things that were important to map about Mexico and the United States. For instance, watersheds. So things that will blur or boundaries that exist because they're man-made or they're political, but they have no other place of being. But they're very scripted in the way that we create narratives. So exercising that capacity of trying to expand, not even change, expand the narrative to things that I want to talk about, mapping as a tool or creating maps became a really important aspect of my practice. So fast forward 2016, I start Borderless as a studio, as a research practice, as a design practice that will allow me to bring all those worlds together, not only in geographic terms, but also disciplinary terms. So I like making things. I create a lot of objects and tools and devices because I like people to interact with them. So interactiveness is always something that I'm trying. It doesn't play well all the time, but I keep trying. But also using geography as a way to understand each other. I feel every time I make a new map, I not only discover new things, but I tend to discover with others. It's like collective discovery, which it makes me even happier. Like, oh, we're discovering things together. So when founding Borderless, I wanted to create this practice that didn't have necessarily a bucket or one bucket. I feel it's very easy for people to want you to put in a bucket. So what do? I get that all the time, and I'm like, I don't know what I do. I just know I do a lot of things. Probably the same, yes. But this idea of combining art, design work, artwork, urban planning work, architecture work, anything that can help to have a conversation and dialogue and advance the things that we want to change. I think for me that is I don't know what it's called, but that's the practice I wanted to build. So it's very young, it's a baby, it's been 2 years around. But I think it's a place where I've been allowed to actually try to integrate things and test. I feel testing, trying things, taking risks that I could probably not be able to take elsewhere. It's a place where I want Borderless to be at, and allow me for collaborative work. The two main purposes of Borderless, or the main focuses, are one, connecting communities to design processes, and secondly, building collaborative agency through multidisciplinary projects. So this is one of the ones that I've been the most excited to be part of recently. And this story is just beginning. So you should see Tonika's and I's list of projects that we already come up with.
How did the two of you meet? Can you tell us the story of how this collaboration started?
How did we meet? Well, it already passed. Did you all see the photo of the black guy with the glasses, with the book at the desk? That's how I met Paula. I met Paula through an Instagram post that man showed me. His name is Guion. He's a developer, and he is the one who purchased the school that Paula's working on, doing her activation project in. And I started talking to Guion about my Folded Map project when I was still working on it. And I met him through a photography assignment. I was just occasionally picking up certain photography assignments that I found interesting that would allow me to meet interesting people, and that was one of them. And I was right, because he was interested. And I told him about Folded Map, and he said, you know, you need to meet Paula. And I was like, who is that? She does amazing work. She's an architect. And so I was just wondering, like, well, I'm a photographer and I'm talking about Folded Map. Like, what is this architect? Let me see. And so he pulled up Instagram and showed me this life-size, large map of Chicago's neighborhood that she created on the parking lot of this school. And it was the aerial view of this huge map. And he told me the significance of it, why she did it, and that was all I needed. I was like, I need to meet her. Because it was in that one picture that I felt connected to her. I was like, she gets it, you know. I didn't know about, you know, the design process way of thinking or any of that. I just saw her map and was like, yes, I do need to meet her. I just knew that we thought the same. I knew that we had like the same values, all from that one photo and of her map that she did, and what it was, the intention of that map to bring awareness to the school closures and the fact that it was on a parking, just everything about it was amazing. And so that was my first impression and how I met Paula. And then after that, I was just fangirling her until we met. But yeah.
Yeah, that's the photo over there.
Oh yeah, that's.
We were putting this show together, the slideshow, and it's like, we need to find this photo where we actually met. Yeah, it was a very instant kind of connection, I would say, as well. Also, when I heard about the project, it just connected with what I was interested in developing, and the type of work that I like doing. So definitely Guion gets all the credit on this connection. We just texted him a photo of us saying, hey, you are responsible for us being today here. Because you really appreciate the capacity of connectors, like knowing people that need to meet each other, and that's still a very important role that some of the folks need to play, and they do play very well.
Great. So once the two of you decided to work together, can you tell us a little bit about what your process was like? What were some of your objectives in this collaboration? And were there any surprises or unexpected issues that came up? And also, what was the most challenging part of this project?
Well, I'll start with kind of talking about the process, because I think this is where Paul and I really unite, and that's, I discovered through working with her that is really kind of where we're kindred spirits. We really value the process and input from the people who are involved, and so she gave me that respect and contributed to the ideas that I already had. And so when I just explained to her, now just imagine, like, folded map is not what you see in that exhibition space right now. It was literally me explaining it and showing a couple pictures. So I was just like, I don't know how I'm gonna like really get anybody to understand what this is or what I want them to contribute that doesn't exist yet. So I basically kind of told her, I just want to help put folded map into context. Other than referring to MPC's report, you know, I'm like, I want it to show these statistics, and I want it to really like show the perspective of the map and how that, you know, so I'm just babbling, basically. I think it's babbling, and I'm just like, I just need a larger context, you know, because the photos and the stories, that's kind of like on the micro level. I need like macro. And then she comes up with this map, you know, like she talked me through what I wanted, and I said kind of like a map, and so before you knew it, she gave me like options.
That's the first sketch.
Yeah, yeah, that was the first sketch, and that was it. That's all I had to show her along with my babbling, and then we went to her studio, and that's when I saw how the real work happens. But I still felt like by the time I got to the studio, I felt like we were more than halfway done, because I was like, oh my gosh, she created this whole vision I did not even imagine, but it was the exact answer to what I wanted. I just knew I didn't have the expertise to kind of see that part through. So that's my response to that. Like, I just felt it was just kindred, and the process of working on it really illuminated a lot for me. I learned a lot about myself as an artist, as a community engagement person, and it was just so wonderful to see that happen in the process of us working together.
So I would say I'm a very slow person. I process very slowly.
Well, maybe that's probably clear.
Maybe. That's the underline, the baseline. But I use design as a way to slow down others. And think with me of intention, aesthetics, interactiveness, engagement, visual engagement, emotional engagement. So I use design tools and design process to slow down. I think, you know, our pace of our lifestyles right now is still bam, 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 bam. It's like everything is so fast. Everything is high pace or fast pace. And I just use design as a tool to slow down and think deeply about what is it that you want to get out of this object, right? And on the back there are two of my former students that helped within this process, Lily and Valerie, who also were part of this process. So I'm always trying to engage different minds, and every single mind in the room is valuable in very different ways, because of naivety, because of like freshness, because of experience, because every opinion, every single voice, every one who has an input has value within the design process. So when we met for the first time, I came to Rach. I took the bus, because I haven't owned a car since I moved to Chicago, which is also very intentional in the way that I need to explore the city by foot and by transit, but also understand the conditions of transit infrastructure, public infrastructure in general. So my studio is located on Cermak and Halsted, and you're almost on Halsted at 66th Street, right? So I take the bus, and I'm just already on this journey, right? On this journey, trying to go not from downtown per se, but it's 22nd, it's Cermak. and seeing this gradient of change. So I'm already embedded and trying to understand why is it what we're trying to communicate in the vastness of a city like Chicago. So we talked, it was the first time we actually met. We've been communicating via text, we've been just trying to share some, common sources and just get into the same baseline. And that was a really, really memorable conversation for me. When you were incredibly humble, and I'm like, this is brilliant. Like, I'm just gonna say yes because many things. Women of color leading important topics in the city of Chicago, okay, check the box. But also the idea is absolutely brilliant. Like, it hadn't occurred to me, and I, been working with maps all the time. So, and because I see maps all the time, I tend to not see things in them. So that's where the collaboration and the freshness of the ideas come. So that was our first meeting, just trying to get into the narrative and the content. You showed me all these photos that were absolutely fascinating. The depth of the exercise of having the residents meet each other. I had goosebumps in that moment. It's like this investment of energy and dedication is just absolutely remarkable. So I just immediately say yes to projects like that. But because there's a substance that for me it's important to put in the same level of conversation that other things that are going on in our city. And art is a means to do it. And I don't know anything about photography. I appreciate it. I know how to take photos with my iPhone. But I just thought it was a really great opportunity to position the role of geography. I feel our connection or our understanding of places and maps has been reduced to our iPhones or our smartphones, and the zoom in and the click and just very transactional relationship with places. To understand places, you need to understand at different scales, spend time looking at them, having that space to ask questions internally and then collectively. So I think that was a really great kind of start of our conversation. When you came to the studio, I just display everything I know how to do, which is options. We developed design options. But the idea was to have, this is your project. I know that from the very beginning, and I just wanted to amplify and support with the tools that I have in hand and the things that I know what to do. So I was really glad you were immediately engaged with all this, design elements and like a little model. We made a model of the gallery. The other thing I said to Rika, I don't really know, and I'm not comfortable working in galleries. My place is kind of in the sidewalks of the cultural center or in the parking lot of a closed school. But I'm just going to do this because it's you. And this is an idea that I really want to get behind, and I want Borderless to support as part of the portfolio of the work that we want to carry and support as from the design perspective.
I feel like we didn't have any challenge other than the installation of the map that Natasha had probably kept for me until. So basically, they installed the map, and then how many days before it fell down? It just came completely down before they got a chance to put all the pegs and everything. But yeah, that wasn't even a challenge to me because they didn't tell me. They kept that away from me, which was cool. They showed me the pictures though.
Well, if you ask Valerie back there.
Oh.
There was a lot of patching Google Earth images because obviously, we wanted the resolution, but we also took some decisions that were kind of interesting, like choosing or just finding that the high resolution imagery that was available free is from the summer season, so a lot of green. The green will show you where the vacancies are. So if you step back from the map, other than the green being in the parks, and it has some applications of saturation and color to just make that much more intentional. But there's a lot of decision making that we made, through the satellite, the patching of the satellite, and thinking, what are the things that we want to talk about, and in addition, of course, to the rotation of the map, which I was super inspired to do this because one of my favorite books is obviously the 1909 plan of Chicago, where the Daniel Burnham drawings are some of the most amazing drawings I've ever seen for, from the planning perspective and, Hunter vision perspective. And many of them are rotated 90 degrees. So I'm like, why did we stop looking at Chicago that way? It was interesting to see, to rotate the map and let people be disoriented and confused for 5 minutes or 2 seconds, and let them think a little, to reset that thinking about north and south relationship, and go back to very early graphics, like this idea of rotating to talk about what things can go across, what systems, road systems, infrastructure systems can be deployed both in the north and the south. That was really interesting in its very early 20th century. And bringing that idea back, very subtle. It's very subtle. We only use Madison Avenue as a highlighter, which is where you start making the folding kind of exercise. But I thought that was like our main contribution from layout perspective was rotating the map. Let's just do it. And obviously the gallery space, it was just well suited to do that with those very long walls. So I'm really glad that worked out pretty well.
The reason it was so easy for me to buy into that is because, like I said, public transportation plays such a huge role in me having the observations that I had with Folded Map. And if you all, I haven't taken the train in so long now since I've gotten older. But, the actual CTA map of the train system, that is how Chicago was to me. I never paid attention to it from that aerial point of view. I only paid attention to it on the red line, going north to south. My friends who lived on the west side, the blue line. So it already was laid out that way to me in my mind based off of the train system. So when she went through the process of proposing that direction of the map for me, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I've been looking at it that way my whole life, so that's fine. So yeah, that was another decision I felt was easy after you went through the process of figuring out what you were going to propose.
Well, the other aspect that we talked about during the process of like creative process was the idea of boundaries. And what defines a real boundary or a physical boundary or just any type of boundary. So the thread that you see in the map, well, there are two types, right? One is neighborhood boundaries, which are just invented boundaries again. They mean something to some people, they mean nothing to others. Some people don't know where the neighborhood starts or ends. So it's more a way for us from the planning perspective to just delimitate territory and study for statistical purposes, for planning purposes. It's convenient, but sometimes these things don't mean anything when you're on the ground. Whereas there are others that are very distinct, like streets, right? Don't go south of 50 right. Blah. If you were a student at University of Chicago and coming, I don't know, a few years ago, you would be told, don't go south of the whatever Midway Pleasant said. So the boundaries that are very real are infrastructural boundaries. So we wanted to play a little bit with that to have that dual legibility, so you don't really see the thread when you're approaching or you see the map from a distance, but then once you start approaching, you realize, oh, there's other line that is defining this, and then you find the name of the different communities. It's like, oh, you make hopefully a relationship between the material, there are the pegs, and the wooden labels of the neighborhood. So there's a lot of hints on what to discard in terms of information and what information is important or relevant.
Great, thanks. So, yes, excellent, thank you. Another question I have that I'm really interested in is what kind of reaction have you gotten from audiences? So can you talk a little bit about the range of responses?
Oh, Well, I think you all being here tonight is a good example of the response.
Who has not been to the map? Who has not been to the exhibition?
Prior to tonight.
Oh, well, that's still not a lot.
The galleries are open till 8 if you
Yeah.
haven't seen it yet.
So you can take a little break and go down. I guess I will just, well, for me, like, when I explained the project to Natasha and Paula, they're the only people that I talked to about Folded Map outside of my friends. And for my friends who have the same lived experience as me, they were like, oh yeah, this is great, this makes sense. So I got their validation early on. When I told Natasha and she thought it was great, that was the first time I had somebody outside of my circle, you know, kind of like give me the nod of approval, like, oh yeah. And then when Paula just validated me and the project even more, that felt great. And so I had no clue other than, you know, the people that were close to me working on it, like what was the potential of the response. So when I put photos of it on social media shortly before the opening and it started, you know, slightly going viral, I was like, really? This was before July. This was before July when I just like dropped 2 pictures of my map twins and then also 2 photos of the addresses that were similar, but on different sides of town. And the social media response just kind of shocked me because I had no idea that the way that I was thinking about it was as unique as it was. And then I had no idea that people would be so interested in it. So it just took me by surprise. It was not only, you know, people from universities or higher education, it was people from all over were responding to me. I would get random messages about, who's my map twin? I live at this address. And, you know, I was like, I don't know, let's look it up. And then, you know, and then the whole other world of urban planners and architects, like I had no idea about this wonderful world. So the response has been from just a lot of different people, which really warmed my heart because that's really the intention of Folded Map, to kind of bring people together. And so I just didn't know the reach that it would have. And even today I got someone telling me about how they're from Minnesota, and then I had somebody messaging me telling me some other state they were from, talking about, you know, our city folds in a different way, but your project, I saw it on social media and it got me thinking, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I just had no clue. I had no clue that the city or all of us were in sync in such a way that we were ready to kind of tackle segregation in this kind of way. And it just really made me feel good to know that so many of us from a variety of different backgrounds were ready to look at these issues in a unique way and observe conversations about it. Because my friends, when I was telling them about the project just a few years ago, they were like, you better watch out. I don't know if people want you exposing like this ugliness, you know? And so that was kind of how I approached working on Folded Map, like, oh gosh, I'm gonna reveal something that we haven't been talking about in the city in this kind of visual way. But that's completely changed now, you know? I feel like there's like a Folded Map family of people who, from a variety of different backgrounds, are ready to talk about this and see more of this done.
I think we were just talking about this before we sat down. This idea of representation and how people want to see themselves being part, represented in this map, became a door that I tested in other exercises, but it hasn't been as powerful as in this one. For many reasons, because museums and galleries have not necessarily been, creating pieces where one can interact with them. So it's always, look but don't touch. The visual engagement is there, but the physical engagement has not existed for a long time. So we wanted to create a piece that would invite. So that's a lot of the thread actually has that intention. So it feels like it's something that it's approachable and it's not finished, and it doesn't matter if you get it right or not. It's more a tool for you to understand where is your home or your workplace in relationship to the whole, to the larger Chicago. So seeing one self as part of a larger geography, right? So it's been really wonderful to see. We run out of tags all the time, but it's a good thing. We want to see everyone represented and excited, and the idea of using very analog tools such as labels and thread and walking or trying to walk people through this very basic exercise, which is, well, just measure yourself against the zero coordinate, which is Madison Street, and just go to the other side and think about it. So that's been a really interesting exercise. And the second, in addition to representation, people wanting or having this desire immediately to want to see themselves represented or reflected, is interpretation. Like that once you get this information, I know who my twin is, what do I do with that information, right? Like it makes you think, it makes you reflect, it makes you just wonder why the circumstances are so different. And that's just, that's opening the door for other aspects of learning and curiosity of why things are the way they are. So I think that's for me the dual aspect, like seeing this desire of seeing oneself represented. I want to be part of that. But also having that internal, but also collective reflection about what does it mean to live in a city that has enabled for so long to be this way.
I also want to say that the response to Folded Map has kind of contributed to the future of it and the direction that I see it going, which I was not prepared for. I did not think about Folded Map having a curriculum while I was making it, but the response to it helped me, accept that should be a reality, because I did not know how many students, young students, who were the same age that I was when I was coming up with the observations or realizing the differences in the neighborhoods in Chicago. Seeing so many after-school Matter students interact with the map, and seeing teachers saying, "Oh, this would be a great resource for this." Teachers tagging me, I was like, well, maybe it should be a curriculum. And that's totally based off of the response. And then also the envisioning a website for it, that's based off of the response, and that's based off of the success and the amazing map that Paula created. Because before Paula's map, I was just thinking, well, if it existed outside of exhibition space, I could just show the pictures and the videos. But now, based off the response, the success of the response, so many tags that we have, I'm like, I would not want to lose that integral aspect of the Folded Map experience just by going on the website. So it has to be that interactive element where people could put in their address and maybe find out what their map twin is just through the website. But I think the most intriguing thing about the response is the fact that we have so many tags now, so many addresses, that we were like, what are we gonna do with this wealth of information? Like, we know it's good information, like it's so many addresses. So the thing that we thought of, we want to use the addresses to create a new map of Chicago. We don't know how. We don't know how we're gonna, we don't know if Folded Map is gonna be the central point and whatever, but we want to use the response of Folded Map to kind of reveal to people, like, this is also Chicago. You know, your participation, your interest is reflected in this new map of Chicago. So I don't know how we're gonna use all these addresses, who gonna enter in all the data. We're gonna figure out some visual representation to reflect the response, because that was unpredictable, and we really want to pay respect to this moment, and the fact that it was here exhibited downtown, which is basically kind of like a 0 point, and so many people from all over have come here to experience it and be a part of it, and have included their addresses. So we definitely want to create a new map of Chicago somehow.
And I would like to invite people, if you have a question, to come up here and ask it at the podium. Great. And I would also just like to also thank MPC for providing us with these lovely magazines. So we have these downstairs in the exhibition gallery as well as on the side of the room. So please make sure to grab one. We have the cost of segregation and the response to the cost of segregation. There's a lot of really wonderful information in here.
Yeah, I highly suggest you grab that, because you all need to know, while I was thinking of Folded Map and working on Folded Map, I was actively reading that report. When that report came out in 2017, I was so thrilled. I was literally like, oh my gosh, this is talking about everything that I want to address in Folded Map. So I really suggest that you get their report and kind of comb through it the same way that I did.
I just want to say first, you guys did an awesome job. The exhibit is beautiful and it's very thought-provoking. Thank you very much. The question I might ask you, what was it like when you first started meeting the people and asking them about their neighborhood, and they're like, why are you asking me this? And then when you introduced them to their partner, how did that go?
Great question. So what surprised me the most about Folded Map and the residents being involved is, honestly and truly, before I started working on Folded Map, I was almost ready to kind of like throw Chicago away. I was like, this issue is not gonna get solved. This is just, you know, I'm just doing this project because I have to get it out of my brain. And I didn't know, I wasn't prepared for the actual impact it could have on the individuals involved. First of all, I didn't even think I was gonna get participants. I was like, they're gonna think I'm crazy. No one's gonna want to meet each other. This is just gonna be just a mess. But it was the opposite. People were the people that did respond to my call for request to participate in Folded Map, the people who responded were all in. They were ready, whether they had been to Inglewood or not. They knew what I was going to be asking. I didn't tell them the specific questions, but they knew that, you know, I was going to ask them personal questions, and they were open to it. You know, if you've seen the videos, you can kind of sense the uncomfortability, the awkwardness, but I mean, I take my hat off to them, because I haven't even answered those questions to my map twin. So I can just only imagine how weird that is. And they were just open to it. They were excited. And so that is also what led me to understand that if you remove certain barriers to people engaging and exploring different neighborhoods, one of the barriers being reassuring them that whatever they heard of the other neighborhood, if it's negative, it's not completely true, because that went for both South and North Side. You know, there was some Inglewood residents that were prepared to feel uncomfortable up north, but they let that go. For North Side residents who were told don't go to Inglewood, they let that go. So it just was a testament to the the empathy people had that I thought was being lost in this city. So I really just commend all of my participants because I learned a lot from them. You're coming to ask a question. Yeah. It's a long walk.
So I am just a tiny bit of a map nerd. Nothing, I'm sure, on you, but I just wanted to you didn't have to give the mic away. This is to both of you. I just wanted to ask because obviously this is one way to kind of fold the city and take two values that are opposite and bring them together. Feasibility aside, I mean, this was enough of an undertaking, but just in terms of ideas you might have for other ways to kind of take I don't know, park access or closeness to the lake, or other ways that you could kind of transpose the city on itself. Anything interesting that you guys might think of?
Well, I'll tell you one that I'm working hard to do is doing school map twins. So I haven't gotten into I'm exploring the possibility. I mean, it would require a lot of stuff. You know, school has to be involved, and kids got to get parents involved. You know, but thanks to the public support and the kind of attention Folded Map has gotten, I think it could possibly happen. I want different schools, different neighborhoods to visit each other and to record the students talking about it. So that's one way, or a different way that I was thinking about kind of doing that.
That's super interesting because you were talking about developing curricula for schools.
I know, right?
And exchange seems like it's an oversight. How do we learn about our cities? But this idea of visiting each other's schools could be really powerful as a way to build empathy and just awareness of, there are other neighborhoods that are not as, they're different. So I did the map that you see in the parking lot. That started as it's an effort to map all the schools that closed in 2013. You can see them because the spots are really small, but they're mapped. It was exactly that, a device to keep awareness. Because when I learned about it, it had already been a couple of years. But then the exercise that we asked everyone when they came and visit the map was, okay, can you stand on top of your neighborhood or your community area? Okay, now can you identify what's the closest close school to you? And that map being in one of the schools that closed, there was a connection of many things. But I think this idea of using maps as a tool to make visible things that are invisible, or not invisible, but not part of the streamlined narratives, it's important. So yeah, public assets, public amenities, those things that we think that are important for investment or reinvestment. I think you can make a map. It comes to the intention. What does a conversation want to drive, and what is the reflection that you want to invite others to have?
I have a question. It's about having the map on a 90-degree angle. When you enter the space, the first thing that you see is the south side, which I think is interesting because the first time I saw it, I thought that you all were trying to make a commentary on the power dynamics in Chicago, and the north side being largely prioritized in terms of investments than the south side and kind of the west side too. Is that something that was intentional? What do you think about that idea and that notion? And what's next in terms of that dichotomy?
I think this project has changed how I ever would depict a map of Chicago in the future. It was all very circumstantial, right? We had a gallery space that had a very long wall, so we definitely, if we wanted a large scale map, we couldn't have it north-south. So out of the question. But then Also, as a person who works with visuals at all, you know that your site automatically always goes to the top. So that's what you see first. If you're designing anything important in terms of information, you put it at the top. Then I wanted to change that reading, that aspect of legibility. And it happened that rotating, again, the reference was Burnham map. So it's always rotated with the lake to the bottom. So you can kind of orient yourself in that way. And it happened that it was perfectly framed. The south side was perfectly framed in this space between the wall that is in the middle of the gallery. So it was a little bit of intentionality, but the layout of the gallery and being opportunistic with that view, I just enjoy so much that view that you're seeing right now, like how the name of the exhibition and then the south side depicted on the backdrop. The fact that kids kind of interact with it, adults, everyone was excited about it. So I think that the gallery helped a lot to make that perspective even more powerful. So definitely, this were the early studies on how to, Madison, yeah, it has to be the center. And then how far can we go? We need to get to 71st. So, we stretched the image as much as we could, but we wanted to definitely highlight, is it Ashland? It's Ashland where all these addresses were originally mapped, to have it in your eye level, so you wouldn't miss it. So there's a lot of layout design, but also you wanted to have the twins from the south side being the first thing that you would recognize as you are navigating the room. I don't know if I would ever use the map of Chicago North-South again. That is the impact that this project has had on me. Because of that, if you want to change narratives, you have to just challenge the way things are seen over and over and over, and we just get used to it, and we get comfortable, and we just have to challenge ourselves in that type of reading. So I think I would like to explore that more and more in multiple projects.
I think I'll leave your answer to that. It will be interesting to see because the next collection of map twins and address pairs will include the West Side and specifically Logan Square neighborhood. So figuring out how that would look map-wise, like if we were, I don't know, maybe we would come to some new discoveries of how to use and twist and turn the map. But the exhibition space definitely, like Paula said, helped kind of crystallize and amplify those things that we wanted to make apparent. But once she did the model and showed me how it was gonna go, all of the things that you said came to mind. I was like, oh, this is perfect. Operating within these restraints, created the perfect setup because I was like, as soon as you walk in, you see the south side. So yeah, no, once I saw the model, I started thinking exactly how you do.
I love your project, and I guess I have two questions. I'm really curious to see inside places, not only to see what people own, which I think is really interesting, and collect, but also because the upkeep of the interior I know is very different in different places. So I was wondering if you were thinking of including interiors. And then my second question is, I know that you're trying to raise money for your next project. And when I see it, I'm thinking, okay, where are the aldermen with money? Where is the city with money? I mean, why are they not involved in providing funds to support a project like this? So those are my two questions and thoughts.
Well, I'll answer the second one first. Well, my alderman, he probably definitely would support it. I've been talking to him about some other site-specific projects that I want to do, including the video projection. I want to do that in my ward. So my alderman definitely is on board with supporting those activities. I have not just outright asked, like, can you donate to my campaign? But I will now. And let's see.
the Logan Square, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, should be in my, oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. But so far as inside people's homes, it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually photographed my first map twin since they were kind of like my guinea pigs. I was like, I don't know if other people are gonna agree to being map twins, so let me just do everything with this first. I was like, maybe I'll have a whole exhibition with just the first map twins. But yeah, I took photos of them in front of their own porches, homes, front of each other's. I took photos of them inside each other's homes, inside their own homes. I posed them the same way inside of this, so I literally did a portrait session. And what's funny is the first map twin, their portrait inside their home actually looked very similar. Like their home was completely different, but the way they had things arranged was similar. You know, their couch and their photos on the wall was so similar that I was like, this isn't really showing a huge difference. It was actually showing how they were so similar. It was very funny to me. So I do have those images, and once I started realizing, as I did more map twins, that photographing the inside would offer a whole different level of like issues and comfortability, you know. So I was already asking a lot of residents to not only participate but travel to each other's neighborhoods. Like 15 miles apart. Then I'm like forcing you to be on camera, ask you like how much is your home, and just looking at you, you know. Like, I didn't want to take that next step and just be like, let me take some pictures of you in your house, you know, because that is a bit more intimate. And I just thought that their level of openness and honesty was enough to do what it was supposed to do for photo maps. So I don't know if I would ever go inside of their homes, because it would have to, speaking of intention, I would have to really know specifically what could be gained from people having that kind of access, because their answers to the questions are very, very difficult to kind of answer and hear other people answer. And I think that's the vulnerability that's as vulnerable as I want to make them. I might add different questions. That might be the only addition, you know, add different questions, or, you know, kind of push the boundaries of the conversation. But yeah, probably not inside their home.
Can you share, I know you're going to talk about this maybe in your next talk here, but can you share just a couple of things that people would say when you show them the flip?
Oh gosh, yeah. That I might do. If I don't take pictures of people inside of their homes, I might do a whole nother set of pictures of the flip. So basically, Wade, which is the middle-aged white guy from Edgewater, if you've been to the exhibit, it's on that main wall. They're the largest photos. He is photographed in front of Nanette's house. And Nanette is photographed in front of his house. Nanette is the middle-aged black woman with the long locks, the dreadlocks. And so she is posed on his porch looking very comfortable and sprawled out. And Wade is posed in front of Nanette's home, just, you know, standing there. And when people saw those photos, which was kind of the reason that I wanted to take their pictures in front of each other's home, because I wanted people to like question, like ask themselves these questions and have the struggle of the stereotypes how Chicago is set up, how the environment really informs kind of the judgments that we make of people. I wanted people to do that on their own. So some people that saw those photos, they proved that I was on the right track with that, because they saw the photo of Wade in front of Nanette's house and asked, you know, why did you take a picture of the landlord in front of the house? And I was like, okay, you're using all of the information based on Chicago that you don't see middle-aged white men in front of homes like that. If you know, you just don't see them being homeowners of a home that looked like Nanette's home, and that is informed by Chicago. And for people, when they saw Nanette in front of Wade's, or not in front of, literally on his porch, you know, looking as if she owned it, they asked, you know, well, what does she do for a living? And so I think that, as surprising, you know, as people find that, honestly, that's kind of what a lot of people thought at some point when seeing those photos. If they were from Chicago, born here, because those are the natural questions, just out of a process of elimination. You know, Chicago segregated. If that was Wade's home, what neighborhood is that? You can't come up with it. So you just know that he doesn't, you know, yeah, you just know he doesn't belong. And for someone like Nanette to live in that house, you're already calculating, you're like, well, we know that's not the South Side. So she's not living on the South Side, she's living on the North Side. It's more expensive, so how much money does she make? You know, and so I really loved how those photos, regardless of how people's thoughts were stereotypical and judgmental, it really kind of revealed how Chicago shapes you to think that, you know. I didn't find any fault with people asking me those questions, because it made sense to me. Like, only in Chicago could you actually be justified in asking or making those type of assumptions, because they're not far-fetched at all. I wish they were, but it isn't.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking. Oh, yes.
We have time for one more question. Yeah? Okay.
Can I just ask, so, thank you. Okay, I guess I could
Yeah.
This was great in the context of just the idea that ordinary citizens can make a difference. So that was really cool. But I want to probe this question of, so could you do this exhibit? So it's in a nice neutral space, but can you pull off an exhibit like this on the south side or the north side? And if not, why not? Or yes, why so?
Funny you ask that, because I actually am waiting on a response from a granting agency to
Not to be named.
not to be named, to have Folded Map exhibited in Inglewood, because that would mean the world to me. And I think it could be pulled off and actually exhibited in Inglewood. Obviously, we don't have a gallery, which will illuminate the point of Folded Map, because the exhibition of it will look very different. And I really want to kind of reveal and expose how different those two exhibitions would look as a result of restraint. You know, we kind of talked about how the setup of the exhibition space here kind of forced us to do the map differently, and so that will obviously kind of be the same process if it were exhibited in Inglewood. You know, we'd really have to think about space and how to utilize it, and utilizing the assets, as well as recognizing that it won't be a lot of walls, you know? So that's definitely something that I'm looking to do first, have the exhibition in Inglewood. And then what was the other question?
Just the
How does
property barriers, like if you were to take it up north I mean, that was part of what I was probing.
Right. It was something else that I wanted to answer when you asked the question. It escapes me. You'll have to come back to me. I had a really good answer to it too.
Speaking of, you want to invite folks to the 14th?
Oh, yes. You just helped me remember. So the other thing that I'm looking to do based off of the response, and also to kind of address what you were getting at, the response in different neighborhoods, I would love to be able to do folded map dinners, you know, where they're actually in the neighborhoods and inviting the mirroring neighborhood or the corresponding neighborhood residents from those neighborhoods to come have dinner with people from the neighborhood that they, you know, kind of share the mirroring point with. And that brings me to the event that is September 14th, which is kind of us tiptoeing into this, using folded map to help connect people and create that bridge to exploring another neighborhood. Inglewood is having its second critical mass bike ride. The first one was very successful. It was a test run. We didn't know how many people was gonna come out. I would say 150 something or close to 200 people came. And so we decided to do it again. And so I imagine it will be even more people. And since I figured that it would be more people, Paula and I have decided to go ahead and explore one of our other projects that we were trying to do together, which is a site-specific video projection, large-scale video projection. And we will be doing that at the end of the bike ride. So it'll be a nice celebratory kind of culminating event at the end of Inglewood's second critical mass bike ride called Roll in Peace, the Remix. And September 14th, and the roll-off and the return will be on 63rd in Ashland. So we really are going to be activating that space in a way it hasn't been done in years. And the actual site that we're going to be doing the video projection is a new vacant lot. So this really is striving to kind of show what was lost, but what we have to do to activate it. It was a bank that had been there. It was vacant for, I would say, definitely 2 decades. And it was just recently torn down. So now it's a huge vacant space that has recently exposed this huge, just clean side of a building, brick wall, perfect for a video projection. So we kind of wanted to activate that space. So that'll be happening September 14th. If you all want to come down to Inglewood and have the best tour of Inglewood ever, definitely come to the Roll in Peace bike ride, and then you'll see the other project Paul and I are working on with some other friends of mine. But the beautiful thing about this video projection is we're going to not only be showing contemporary images of Chicago that will include some of my photos, but we're also including some historic photos of Chicago, the South Side and the West Side. And then we invited residents in Inglewood to submit their own photos so that we can project. So it'll be a nice collection of, you know, like a family photo album, live projection at the end of this bike ride. So yeah.
Great.